All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We try to check out great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, uh, grand unified theories, magnum opuses, tour de forces, and earth-shattering discoveries from obscure sources, ancient and modern, and we do this so that you might be able to have a better time with your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your formation of a holistic worldview, your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health. And today is our 207th video that we've done called the Reciprocal Church, in honor of Dewey B. Larson and his reciprocal system of theory, where he is really the first to articulate a scientific-based spirituality. He calls his God character Sector 3 and deduces it through logical means. And we'll get into a lot of that coming up. We've already done almost 600 videos on the reciprocal system, but we will revisit kind of the part that he calls beyond space and time, and looking at the spiritual component. But other than that, we've been assembling spiritual resources, different practices, different points of view, different perspectives, and things that you can use in your own life to enrich your spirituality. And we feel like this is going to be increasingly necessary as the Western religions fall by the wayside, as they have been proven to be fraudulent, all three of them. But in particular, we were looking at Christianity, the New Testament, and how the New Testament was an obvious psyop from the Romans, psychological operation, in order to really take the edge off of the Jews. The Jews had been basically fighting a war with the Romans for a couple hundred years. By the time some of the Roman emperors, Titus, Vespasian, but even before him, all the way back to Tiberius, Claudius, Nero, not so much Nero, but Tiberius and Claudius, and then eventually there were the four emperors for 1 year in the year 68 AD, and eventually Emperor Vespasian took over in 69 AD, and he and his son Titus were called the Flavian dynasty, and they, under their leadership, all of the Gospels were issued. Now their Genesis goes, so-called, goes a little bit before that, but they went under Titus and Vespasian. But a couple authors who have remained obscure, Abelard Rushlin and Roman Piso, which is a pseudonym, I believe, they have independently uncovered that the person who's really responsible for writing the Gospels in their final form, or in this form, were a guy named Arius Calpurnius Piso, who was a Roman, and he was a Roman elite, kind of was the shadow emperor under Vespasian and Titus. And his children all became emperors and popes and so on. His children also were in on it with him. He wrote the Gospels kind of as plays. He wrote himself into the role of Jesus. He also wrote himself into the role of Joseph. And he wrote his kids into the roles of the apostles. And they would literally travel around and perform plays in front of the hoi polloi to convert them. But particularly the Jews in the early days, but then the Gentiles later, after the epistles were written in about 100, mainly written by Pliny the Younger, the well-known writer who was an in-law of Calpurnius Piso, or Arius Calpurnius Piso. And the epistles were really kind of an attempt to start recruiting the Gentiles. It was first targeted toward the Jews because the Jews had, been such a pain in the side of the Romans with all of these rebellions and really a 2-century-long war against the Romans in Palestine. And they wanted to create a hero, the Jewish hero, who, or really even a Jewish religion that believed in being the Prince of Peace and to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and to turn the other cheek and to be happy with your low pay and to recognize that slaves, have their place and to carry your backpack for an extra mile and to see that the Roman soldier has greater faith than all of Israel. And so they wrote all of that stuff into the Gospels. The Gospels are incredibly anti-Jew and pro-Roman, which should be a pretty big red flag right there, because that's just not the things that kind of happen in the Gospels just would never happen in real life. In the context of first century Rome, if you understand first century Rome at all, you have to kind of suspend disbelief to really think that some of these things could actually happen. Even down to like the crucifixion. Crucifixion is not something that you put the person up and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he's already dead. Crucifixion is something that takes a couple days to kill you, maybe several days to kill you. So, that whole part of it is, just one of many examples. But anyway, the way it was written, well, the other thing that I would say is that Calpurnius Piso wrote under the pen name of Josephus as well. So if you read Josephus and his history called The War of the Jews, and you read it side by side in unison with the Gospels, you will realize that those two works were written in unison, were written side by side, were written to be read at the same time, intertextually. And when you do that, you will see one paragraph after another, or one parallel after another, after another, after another. And in general, what you will see is that Jesus will predict something or prophesy something in a parable, like a symbolic language. And then you read Wars of the Jews, and Titus, who is the emperor, but at the time of this story, he was the general. in the war against the Jews, Titus fulfills Jesus' prophecies, literally. So Titus does something literally. Jesus prophesies that thing figuratively. And there are a ton of separate parallels, not just like 5 or 6, like, thousands in the New Testament, between the New Testament and Wars of the Jews. We're going to be going over the book of Luke as well as Wars of the Jews in upcoming videos. It'll probably take like a month to go through the book of Luke with the parallels. But there are, I believe, about 250 parallels just in the book of Luke and the Wars of the Jews. Now, some of these parallels are a little bit hard to spot, and some of them you have to know what you're looking for to find them. Some of them are incredibly obvious, but the basic idea is that they're putting them there so that you will eventually discover them, but you won't discover them like in the time that they're still alive, that the authors are still alive. And you have to kind of know what you're looking for. Once you see it, you see that a lot of it is a cruel joke, a mockery, and it shows a great hatred toward the people that they are targeting, the Jews. And the work of Joseph Atwill is probably he's the 21st century, the person who's kind of opened up this work in the 21st century with his work, Caesar's Messiah, and also Shakespeare's Secret Messiah. But there are also books like Creating Christianity by Henry Davis and someone else. Sorry, I can't remember. And but in the last few months, a book has been published by Michael Menescatz called The Origins of Christianity, and he goes through all these parallels from the book of Luke. And what he does is he uses graph paper and he plots all the points wherever there's a parallel. So you can see my thumbnail for the video. The book of Luke is on the vertical axis, and the book of Wars of the Jews is on the horizontal axis. And so, the book of Luke has 24 chapters. So, start at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, up to 24. And then Wars of the Jews has like 700 paragraphs. And so you count all the paragraphs. And so say there's a parallel on paragraph 300 and book chapter 6. Plot it right there. And here's another parallel, paragraph 400 and Luke chapter 14. Plot it right there. He plots all 250 or so of the points, and you see that the Romans actually signed their names. Arius Piso, Titus, and Vespasian signed their names to the book of Luke and the Wars of the Jews. So that is, I'd say, a pretty thorough proof of it. But these ideas were introduced earlier, much earlier. They've been known throughout history. Many of the great authors of the world of history have known that the Romans wrote the Gospels in order to subvert the Jews. And in fact, William Shakespeare's books, plays, every last one of them is about that topic. And it's an attempt to reverse the kind of the curse that the Gospels put on the Jews, and to reverse that. Everything that was done by the Piso family to the Jews was done in return by so-called William Shakespeare in his plays. But he is really a her, and she is really a Jew named Amelia Bassano. And that was exposed by Joseph Atwill, and also written about by John Hudson in his book, Shakespeare's Dark Lady. But before them came Abelard Reuchlin and Roman Piso. They are the ones who've done all the digging. Roman Piso and Abelard Reuchlin, they could read Hebrew, they could read Greek, they could read Latin. I think they could read Aramaic and possibly even Egyptian. And they've read everything that has been written that we have discovered from the 1st and 2nd centuries, from Rome or Palestine, and especially the letters of Pliny the Younger, the letters of Tacitus, the letters of the works of Josephus, the Gospels, and some of the works of Seneca, and whoever else wrote at that time period, but especially the private letters, and they discovered that like pretty much everything was written by somebody who was either in the royal family or like an emperor, or directly in their family, in their immediate family, and that but they used a bazillion pseudonyms or aliases, where they signed their name as Josephus, as Luke and Mark and Matthew, as Plutarch, as the church fathers like Saint Ignatius, and the Piso project went on for about 70 years. Revelation was finally written in like 137, Hebrews in 140, right before the death of Piso's grandson, Julius. And then all of Piso's direct descendants became emperors and popes. So starting with in 140, I think 140 somewhere, like 141, 138, I believe, was the accession of Antoninus Pius. That was actually also, he had the pen name of Suetonius Tranquillus, and he was the emperor. He was the grandson. I'm not sure if it's the direct grandson of Roman Piso. And then all of the rest of the Roman emperors and all the popes are related to the Pisos. So this went on it still goes on. He says 99% of the elites in society now are descendants of the Pisos. And so right now we're going to read just the first chapter of an addendum to his work. So Reuchlin in 1971, way before anybody else was doing this, wrote the book called The True Authorship of the New Testament. Now, he does have some predecessors. There was a guy named Ronald Syme who wrote in the early 20th century. He was at Oxford, and he wrote, he was a Roman scholar, and he recognized that some of these letters were conveying a lot of kind of a coded language that they used to write the Gospels. You kind of have to know the code, and you have to know what you're looking for to get a lot of it. And if you do, you recognize that there's a lot of like gutter humor, really somewhat disgusting and degrading, pornographic humor, a lot of gay sex in the Gospels. but you have to kind of know what you're looking for. He kind of uncovered that way back in the early 20th century. There was also a guy named Bruno Bauer who was actually a student, a teacher of Karl Marx. But in 1875, he pointed out how the Romans wrote the Gospels. Many authors from that period also, including Tolstoy, Cervantes from an earlier period, Bertrand Russell, C.S. Lewis, Mary Shelley. These people all knew the deal, but they couldn't really come out with it overtly. Reuchlin, I think, was the first person to come out with it overtly, and he did that in the book, The True Authorship of the New Testament. We went through that book over the last week or so. Now we're looking at the addendum to this book, which is called Islam, its Quran and Hadith, and its leadership. So he's basically saying that the Piso family also wrote the Quran, meaning that the Quran is also a fraud. And he's going to kind of demonstrate that here. I don't know that we're going to go through the whole book here. It's not that long, but first couple chapters. And let's see. The introduction. Islam, its Quran and Hadith, and its leadership. The foregoing true authorship of the New Testament has had basically three purposes. So this is his previous work. The true authorship of the New Testament. First, to prove which of the Pisos composed which of the New Testament books. Second, to illustrate the code systems which they developed and used in their writings in order to copyright themselves into their works. They used a lot of number codes and aliases to, indicate that, to sign their names to it without overtly signing their names to it. Kind of to sign their names for posterity, so that history would discover that they wrote these, but people that in the current day would not discover. And they probably would be surprised to find out that 2,000 years later, they still are pulling off this hoax. Third, to also give examples of the countless great authors since the Piso's day who have likewise used the code systems to show that they too knew the great secret. That is how the Quran now enters the picture. The greatest inner circle is like the people that were in the know, that are in the know now. Many of them relatives of the Pisos and maybe some of the other lines of the emperors. The greatest inner circle writing since the New Testament itself has been the Quran. The tribe of Muhammad, the Quraysh, who put the Quran together about 652 AD or CE, which was about 20 years after his death, expressed their inner circle knowledge in various ways, as we will show. However, they also relied on the Piso's great work for the authenticity of its characters. And because as we will prove, Piso and his family had created many characters beyond those in the Hebrew Bible. The Quraysh necessarily followed his path by authenticating 10 of those fictional Pisonian characters. We will commence by explaining those 10 characters and then continue by exploring other aspects of the Quran and of the Hadith, which were later composed as supplements to it. And we will also explain what we have been able to decipher as to the background of the writing of the Quran. We realize that this section on the Quran is a long divergence from the Pisonian saga, particularly because the true authorship of the New Testament, which is the first volume, covers only approximately to the end of Antoninus's reign, 161 CE. He's the grandson of Calpurnius Piso, also known as Suetonius, Antoninus is. However, because of the Quran's importance with the countless allusions to the New Testament and its characters, and because of the vital importance today of knowledge of the Quran to the Western world, we ask the reader's kind indulgence, for we have inserted the inception of Islam, although in the 500s, here at the end of the true authorship of the New Testament. We should also note that two words frequently used in this chapter have alternative English spellings. Okay, we'll skip that. He goes through a few of the sources that he uses, and then we move to chapter 2. The 10 fictional characters which the Quraysh inserted in the Quran. It was not solely the Quraysh use. Now that is the tribe of Muhammad. The Quraysh use of a few inner circle numbers, notably 19 and 114 in the Quran, by which they secretly showed they knew what Piso had done and were patterning their work after his. Nor was it only their inclusion of the fictional Jesus which showed their inner circle knowledge. Rather, it was especially their honorable insertion of at least 9 other fictional characters in addition to Jesus, which Piso had also created, by which they secretly sought to emulate him. And by so including all these Pisonian created characters, it was the Quranic authors themselves who forever proved that their book was fiction. Proving that these 10 characters in the Quran were fictional necessitates a twofold realization. One is that these named persons had not appeared in writings prior to Piso's day, and two, that the books in which they first appeared had been written by Piso or his family. First, of course, the leading fictitious character created by Piso and whom the Quran later honorably includes was Jesus himself. It calls him Isa, I-S-A, and mentions him all through the Quran. It is Isa to whom it makes Muhammad, the great and ultimate successor, the zeal of the prophets. I'm sorry, I need to shrink this type because I'm not sure I'm reading that word right. The seal of the prophets. A second fictional character it inserted was Mary, the mother of Jesus. Chapter 19 of the Quran was entitled The Chapter of Mary. A third fictional character was John the Baptist, mentioned in chapters 19 and 21. And a fourth was his father, Zechariah, who was also mentioned in those same chapters. Piso had created John and given him his patronymic, as well as his personal name, after Yohanan ben Zakkai, who was an early one of the founders of the Jewish, I guess, university kind of thing at Gophna, which was kind of a concession that they got from the Romans in this War of the Jews, given to the Pharisees, and that's kind of where the Talmud came. And Ben Zakkai is an interesting character because he has a very similar story to Josephus's, which is that they both surrendered to Emperor Vespasian, who was also a military general. According to their stories, they both surrendered to Emperor Vespasian and had an epiphany that God now is roots for the Romans and not the Jews, and that they gave Vespasian the star prophecy, saying that I foresee that you will someday become emperor. And when Vespasian actually did become emperor, he hooked both of them up, and he set up Josephus as his court historian and his adopted son gave him a Flavian name, Flavius Josephus, and that's where Josephus wrote Wars of the Jews and Antiquities of the Jews. Of course, that's all a lie, because Josephus never existed. He was just this pen name of Calpurnius Piso. I don't know about Yohanan ben Zakkai. He has the same story, so you have to figure that he is a fictional character. However, Mr. Reuchlin is a Jew, and so, you know, he kind of, he can see it when it happens to the Christians, but he can't see it, or he can see it when it happens to the Muslims, but he can't see it when it happens to the Jews. Piso does better. He recognizes that all three of these religions are fraudulent. Reuchlin thinks that Judaism is the real deal, and that Christianity and Islam are frauds. So that's a weak point there for him. He should have been able to figure that out. But anyway, Piso had created John and given him his patronymic as well as his personal name after Johanan ben Zakkai. It was mockery of him, his opponent, who had obtained the permission of Vespasian to found the Judean school at Yavne, otherwise known as Gophna, I believe. It is obvious from this true authorship book that in the Gospels, Piso had created the foregoing 4 fictional characters, which were later also included in the Quran. However, the Quran also includes 6 additional fictional characters who Piso had created and inserted in the Gospels. The proof that Piso actually created these additional 6 will be set forth in the next volume, entitled The Piso's Further Writings. We commence an explanation of the additional 6 characters with the important Satan. Piso had created Satan in the Gospels, and he was later inserted prominently in the Quran. The Quran also mentions Iblis, a genie whom the Quran says was rebellious because he refused to worship Adam. Okay, well, we'll get back with this tomorrow when we return, but it is important to recognize that Piso created the concept of Satan, or the character of Satan. The word Satan is used a few times in the Old Testament, but never as this kind of all-powerful red character with a pitchfork that damns you to hell. That's Hollywood. The New Testament at least uses the kind of idea of Satan, but he's he's a departure from the Old Testament, but not like Hollywood. Okay, thanks for tuning in.